I have lived with a complicated truth my entire life. I love my sister Grace, but there are moments when I absolutely hate what her severe autism has done to our family. For 30 years, I have watched my parents sacrifice everything, including my own childhood. I have spent nights crying in frustration, mornings waking up to screams, and holidays ruined by meltdowns. Yesterday, after another family gathering ended in chaos, I finally snapped and said things I cannot take back. Before I share my story, where are you watching from? Hit like and subscribe if you have ever felt guilty about resenting someone you know you should love unconditionally. Sometimes family is not what we expected. My earliest memories are filled with undivided attention from my parents, Jessica and David. For 5 blissful years, I was their only child, the center of their universe. Mom would read me bedtime stories every night, and Dad would take me fishing on weekends. We had family movie nights, beach vacations, and holiday celebrations that went exactly as planned. Life was predictable, stable, and filled with laughter. When my parents announced they were having another baby, I was ecstatic. I dreamed about teaching my little sister how to ride a bike, build sandcastles, and all the things an older brother should do. I helped Dad paint the nursery a soft yellow, and picked out a stuffed elephant that would become her first toy. When Grace was born, she looked perfect with her tiny fingers and bright blue eyes. For the first year and a half, everything seemed normal. She smiled, babbled, and reached for toys just like any baby would. Then things began to change. While other toddlers her age were stringing together simple sentences, Grace remained silent. She stopped making eye contact and began rocking back and forth for hours. She developed an obsession with lining up her toys in perfect rows and would scream uncontrollably if anyone disrupted her arrangements. My parents noticed these signs but tried to convince themselves it was just a phase. The diagnosis process was brutal. We visited 5 different doctors over 8 months. Each appointment brought new tests, questionnaires, and observations. I remember sitting in cold waiting rooms watching my mother clutch her purse with white knuckles as we waited for results. The final diagnosis came when Grace was nearly 3 severe autism, with significant cognitive impairment, sensory processing disorder, and minimal verbal capabilities. My parents were devastated but immediately switched to warrior mode. They researched every treatment, therapy, and educational approach available. Our house transformed into a therapy center with specialized equipment, picture cards on every surface, and a rotation of speech therapists, occupational therapists, and behavioral specialists coming through our door daily. The financial strain was immediate and crushing. Insurance covered only a fraction of what Grace needed. My parents depleted their savings within a year. Dad took on extra shifts at the hospital where he worked as a nurse, often coming home with dark circles under his eyes only to jump straight into Grace's therapy routines. Mom quit her job as an elementary school teacher to become Grace's full-time caregiver and advocate. The changes in our family life were swift and dramatic. My 8th birthday party was the first casualty. Grace had a complete meltdown when my friends arrived, overwhelmed by the noise and unfamiliar faces. She broke my birthday cake, throwing it against the wall while screaming at a pitch that made everyone cover their ears. My friends left early, and I spent the afternoon helping clean frosting off the wallpaper while my mother rocked Grace for hours. Vacations became a thing of the past. Parent-teacher conferences were attended by exhausted relatives, while my parents dealt with Grace's latest crisis. My bedroom was converted into a sensory room for Grace when her therapist suggested it would help with her development. I was relocated to the unfinished basement, where I could hear the constant thudding of Grace pacing above me all night. I remember the first time I felt pure resentment toward my sister. I was 9, and Dad had promised to come to my soccer championship. He had missed most of my games that season, but swore he would make it to this one. 10 minutes before the final whistle with the score tied, and me looking hopefully toward the parent section every chance I got, he was still absent. We won the game, and I received the MVP medal with no one there to see it. When I got home, I found out Grace had flushed her communication device down the toilet, flooding the bathroom and requiring emergency plumbing repairs. That night, I cried silently in my basement bedroom and felt a new emotion take hold, a burning hatred that made me immediately sick with guilt. How could I hate my sister for something she could not control? What kind of person was I becoming? As our neighbors and extended family gradually stopped visiting, our home became increasingly isolated. The world outside continued turning while ours revolved entirely around Grace's needs, schedules, and limitations. By the time I turned 12, I had become a shadow in my own home, visible only when needed as an extra pair of hands during Grace's meltdowns. Entering middle school was my first taste of real social awareness. Suddenly, I understood just how different my home life was from my peers. While other kids complained about sharing bathrooms with siblings or fighting over the television remote, I was helping restrain my sister during violent episodes and cleaning up after accidents that continued well beyond when most children were toilet trained. Friends who did visit once rarely returned. The unpredictability of Grace's behavior made everyone uncomfortable. Jake, my best friend since kindergarten, stopped coming over after Grace became fixated on his red hair, following him around and repeatedly touching it, despite his obvious discomfort. Eventually, he started making excuses when I invited him, and our friendship gradually faded. The science project incident became legendary in our household. I had spent weeks building a model of the solar system for the 8th grade science fair. The night before the presentation, Grace wandered into the garage where I had stored it and became fascinated with the spinning mechanism. Within minutes, she had dismantled the entire project, breaking the carefully painted planets and bending the metal structure beyond repair. When I broke down in tears, my parents offered little sympathy. "She does not understand what she did," Mom explained, while Dad helped me cobble together a last-minute replacement that earned me a C-. The message was clear: Grace's limitations trumped my disappointments every time. School became another battlefield. Word spread about my weird sister, and bullies found fresh ammunition. Retard's brother became my unofficial nickname among a certain crowd. I got into 3 fights defending Grace's honor, ironically earning suspensions that my parents had no emotional bandwidth to address properly. My middle school graduation ceremony should have been a proud moment, but instead it became another Grace story. Halfway through the principal's speech, she began screaming, overwhelmed by the auditorium lights and crowd. My parents had to drag her out while she fought against them, knocking over chairs and causing a scene that had everyone staring. I walked across the stage to receive my diploma to the sound of whispers and giggles from the audience. Dating in high school proved nearly impossible. Marissa, my first girlfriend, tried to be understanding. She came over for dinner, smiled politely through Grace's repetitive questions, and held my hand under the table when Grace threw her food across the room. But after witnessing a full meltdown where Grace bit herself until she bled, Marissa broke up with me via text the next day. "I really like you," she wrote, "but I cannot handle your family situation." College dreams were the next sacrifice on the altar of Grace's needs. The money my grandparents had set aside for my education was redirected toward an expensive specialized therapy program that promised breakthroughs in Grace's development. Instead of attending the state university where I had been accepted with a partial scholarship, I enrolled in the local community college and continued living at home to help with Grace's care. "Grace would give anything to have your opportunities" became my mother's reflexive response whenever I expressed frustration about my circumscribed life. "She is trapped in a mind and body that will not cooperate with her. Your challenges are nothing compared to hers." The comparison made logical sense but did nothing to soothe my growing resentment. Family therapy sessions, which were supposed to help us all cope, invariably centered around Grace's needs. The therapist would ask me about my feelings, but the conversation always circled back to how I could better support my sister or understand her perspective. My pain was secondary, an inconvenient distraction from the real crisis at hand. I watched other families with envy bordering on obsession. I would stare at fathers playing catch with their sons in the park, mothers attending their daughters' dance recitals, siblings arguing over normal things like borrowing clothes or hogging the bathroom. Their problems seemed so trivial, so luxurious compared to the daily battle zone of our home. By my senior year of high school, depression had become my constant companion. I stopped inviting people over, stopped mentioning my sister, stopped expecting my parents to attend my events. I created a separate identity at school, the guy with decent grades and a dry sense of humor who never talked about his home life and never hosted parties. Dad became increasingly distant, working double shifts and volunteering for every overtime opportunity. When home, he retreated to his workshop in the garage, emerging only for meals and Grace's most severe episodes. Mom, meanwhile, had developed a laser focus on Grace's care that left little room for anything or anyone else. Her identity had merged completely with her role as Grace's advocate and protector. Amanda entered my life during my second year of community college. She was different from Marissa, more patient and insightful. She studied psychology and approached Grace with genuine curiosity rather than fear. For a while, I believed she might be the one person who could truly understand. We dated for 14 months, the longest relationship I had managed. But even Amanda had limits. After Grace ruined her birthday dinner by throwing a glass of water in her face for speaking too loudly, Amanda gently suggested we spend more time at her apartment, and less at my house. Gradually, she too began to drift away, unable to fully commit to the chaos that accompanied my family life. At 23, I was still living at home, working a job I hated at an insurance company, while taking night classes toward a business degree. The trajectory of my life felt entirely determined by factors beyond my control. A passenger in my own story. While friends from high school were graduating from universities, traveling abroad, or starting exciting careers, I was helping my aging parents manage an increasingly strong and sometimes violent adult daughter with the mind of a child. Then Sarah entered my life like a revelation. As a special education teacher, she understood the complexities of autism in ways no one else I had dated could comprehend. We met at a community workshop about supporting adults with disabilities where she was a presenter and I was attending with my parents. She noticed me asking questions and approached me afterward. "You speak like someone who really understands the daily reality," she said, handing me her card. Not just the textbook version. Her smile contained no pity, just recognition. Dating Sarah felt like finally being seen. She did not need extensive explanations about why last-minute cancellations sometimes happened, or why I carried a special backpack filled with Grace's comfort items everywhere we went. She asked thoughtful questions about Grace, and offered practical suggestions without overstepping. After 18 months together, I proposed. Sarah said yes, and for the first time I could envision a future that balanced my family obligations with my own happiness. We planned a small wedding carefully structured around Grace's routine and comfort level. My parents were cautiously optimistic, though I could see the worry lines deepen around my mother's eyes whenever wedding preparations were discussed. The rehearsal dinner became the breaking point I never saw coming. We had taken every precaution, scheduling it during Grace's most stable time of day, bringing her favorite foods, even having her therapist attend as a guest to help manage any issues. But when the restaurant staff changed the music to something with a heavy bass line, Grace's sensory system overloaded completely. What followed was the worst meltdown I had ever witnessed. At 25, Grace was physically strong and difficult to restrain. She overturned tables, threw glassware, and ultimately attacked Sarah's mother when the older woman made the mistake of trying to help calm her down. By the time we managed to get Grace safely home, Sarah's family was sitting in shocked silence, their clothes stained with food, the private dining room in shambles. That night, Sarah's father took me aside. "Son, I respect what your family has dealt with," he said quietly. "But I need to know what your plan is for keeping my daughter safe and happy. This cannot be her everyday life." His words hit me like physical blows because they articulated fears I had been suppressing for years. The wedding proceeded as planned, but a shadow hung over the ceremony. Sarah's family was politely distant. Grace attended only briefly with a hired caregiver, and my parents looked exhausted beyond words. What should have been the happiest day of my life instead felt like a tense negotiation between competing needs. In the months that followed, I sank into a depression deeper than any I had experienced before. Sarah tried to be supportive, but the strain showed in our new marriage. When she gently brought up the possibility of starting our own family, panic seized me. What if we had a child like Grace? What if the genetic factors that affected my sister were lurking in my DNA as well? More importantly, how could we possibly raise children while managing Grace's needs? The final straw came during a family dinner where my parents casually mentioned their estate planning. "Of course you will be Grace's guardian when we are gone," my father stated, not as a question but as an established fact. "We have set up a special needs trust, but the house will go to both of you with the understanding that Grace will always live here with you and Sarah." I stared at them, speechless. My entire future had been decided without my input. Sarah squeezed my hand under the table, her knuckles white. 2 weeks later, I received a job offer from a company in Colorado 1,000 miles away from our Illinois home. The position offered better pay, advancement opportunities, and most tantalizingly, distance. When I showed Sarah the offer letter, her eyes filled with tears of relief. "We need to at least consider it," she whispered. The argument with my parents when I mentioned the possibility of moving was explosive. Words held back for decades came pouring out, ugly and unstoppable. "I have given up everything for Grace," I shouted, my voice breaking. "My childhood, my education, my friendships, and now you expect me to give up my marriage and career too. I love her, but sometimes I hate what she has done to all of us. I hate what she has done to me." My mother collapsed into tears while my father's face hardened into something unrecognizable. "She did not choose this," he said coldly, "but you are choosing to abandon your sister when she needs you most." I left the house that night, staying with Sarah at a hotel. For 3 weeks there was silence between me and my parents, the longest we had ever gone without speaking. During that time, I wrote a lengthy post on Reddit's Am I the Asshole forum, pouring out 30 years of complicated feelings and asking strangers if my resentment made me a terrible person. The responses surprised me. While some people criticized my feelings, many more shared similar stories. Siblings of special needs individuals wrote about their own complex emotions, the love mixed with resentment, the guilt intertwined with grief for what might have been. Several recommended books and support groups, specifically for siblings of autistic people. One commenter, a psychologist, mentioned autism sibling syndrome, a term I had never heard, that described the depression, anxiety, and identity issues commonly experienced by people in my situation. Sarah found me reading the comments with tears streaming down my face. "You are not alone in this," she said softly. "And you are not a bad person for having human feelings." She suggested I speak with a therapist who specialized in families of individuals with special needs, and for the first time I agreed without hesitation. Dr. Bennett became my lifeline. In our first session, he asked me something no one had ever asked before. "When was the last time someone put your needs first?" I could not answer because I could not remember such a time. That question opened a floodgate of realizations about how thoroughly I had internalized the belief that my needs would always be secondary. More profoundly, Dr. Bennett helped me understand that Grace might be suffering more than any of us. "The world is painfully overwhelming for people with severe sensory processing disorders," he explained. "Imagine every sound feeling like a physical assault, every bright light burning your eyes, every unexpected touch triggering panic. Her meltdowns are not tantrums. They are her nervous system in complete distress." This perspective slowly began to transform how I viewed both Grace and myself. Therapy with Dr. Bennett continued weekly, then bi-weekly, as I began to develop healthier perspectives. He encouraged me to educate myself about autism from a clinical standpoint rather than just through my personal experience. I read research papers, watched documentaries, and even volunteered at an adult autism care facility to see how other families manage similar challenges. The care facility visit was particularly eye-opening. I met adults with autism more severely affected than Grace, as well as those who were higher functioning. I spoke with staff members who had chosen this difficult work and found meaning in it. Most impactfully, I met other siblings whose stories mirrored mine in many ways, yet who had found balance in their own lives while maintaining connections with their autistic family members. One afternoon, I asked my father to meet me for coffee, just the two of us. It was the first time we had been alone together in years. After awkward small talk, I asked him something that had been bothering me since childhood. "Do you ever resent the life we ended up with?" His eyes welled with tears, something I had seen only twice before in my life. "Every single day," he admitted in a voice barely above a whisper. "And then I hate myself for feeling that way." That confession opened a door between us that had been closed for decades. He described his own grief for the father he had wanted to be, versus the one circumstances forced him to become. We talked for 4 hours that day, beginning the slow process of rebuilding our relationship as adults with shared burdens rather than as the parent who sacrificed and the child who was sacrificed. A similar conversation with my mother followed weeks later. After initial resistance, she eventually acknowledged her own complicated feelings. "I love Grace with every fiber of my being," she said. "But there are nights when I lie awake wondering who I might have been if our lives had taken a different turn. Then the guilt crushes me because how can a mother think such things? Together, we began to develop a more sustainable approach to Grace's care. I researched respite programs that would give my parents regular breaks. Sarah and I decided to take the job in Colorado, but committed to monthly visits and video calls 3 times weekly. Most importantly, we began honest discussions about long-term planning for Grace's care that included professional support structures rather than placing the entire burden on me. I found an online support group specifically for siblings of severely autistic people. These virtual strangers understood aspects of my experience that even Sarah or Dr. Bennett could not fully comprehend. Through their stories and advice, I learned practical strategies for maintaining boundaries while staying connected to my family. I discovered I was not alone in my conflicted feelings, nor was I a monster for having them. The most unexpected development was finding a genuine connection with Grace through music. A new music therapist discovered that Grace responded positively to low, rhythmic cello pieces. I had played cello in high school, but abandoned it during college. I dug my old instrument from the attic and began playing for Grace during our visits. For the first time, I saw her fully calm and engaged with me, rocking gently in time with the music, occasionally making eye contact. These moments, though brief, felt like tiny windows into who she might have been under different circumstances. Over time, we established a new normal. Sarah and I moved to Colorado but returned for 1 week each month. We set up a dedicated room in our new home for Grace's visits, which happened quarterly, with the help of a specialized travel companion. I maintained my therapy sessions via video call and continued educating myself about autism research and support services. My relationship with Grace transformed as well. I stopped seeing her as the force that had derailed my life and began recognizing her as a person struggling to navigate a world that felt hostile and overwhelming to her. I noticed her subtle forms of communication that I had missed before, small gestures of affection preferences, and even humor that expressed her personality beyond her diagnosis. The hatred I had carried for so long gradually dissolved, revealing the truth beneath it. I had never truly hated Grace. I had hated the circumstances, the inequitable distribution of attention, the financial struggles, the social isolation, and most of all, the powerlessness I felt in the face of a condition none of us could control. Grace was as much a victim of these circumstances as anyone else, perhaps more so. Sarah proved to be the partner I had always needed but never thought I deserved. She helped me establish healthy boundaries, while encouraging me to maintain meaningful family connections. She understood when visits with my family left me emotionally drained and created space for me to process those feelings without judgment. The guardianship question was resolved through careful planning with an attorney who specialized in special needs cases. We established a team approach that included me as a co-guardian with oversight responsibilities, but with professional care managers handling day-to-day support after my parents could no longer manage. The solution was neither perfect nor easy, but it was realistic and acknowledged everyone's needs, including mine. Looking back on my journey from resentment to acceptance, I realized that love comes in many forms, not all of them comfortable or Instagram-worthy. My love for Grace is complicated by shared history, unfulfilled expectations, and practical challenges, but it is no less real for being complex. I have learned that I can simultaneously acknowledge the genuine hardships her condition created in my life while still valuing her as my sister. I no longer believe that unconditional love means sacrificing your own well-being. True compassion requires enough self-care to prevent burnout. By tending to my own needs, I have become more present and effective in supporting both Grace and my parents. The oxygen mask principle applies here as it does on airplanes. Secure your own before helping others. Have you ever had to reconcile difficult feelings about someone you love? How did you find balance between meeting their needs and preserving your own mental health? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more authentic family stories. And remember, complex emotions do not make you a bad person. They make you human. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps others feeling trapped between love and resentment. You know they are not alone on this journey.